Jonathan from YouTube wanted me to address a story that I very briefly alluded to during the history segment last week. I was talking about Linda McMahon, and I had mentioned a very important phone call that she had made years ago that could have changed the course of the company forever. It was actually a memo that she sent. There is some debate about whether or not there was also a phone call, but it was an inter-office memo that she had sent to Pat Patterson. So I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of this, because the whole thing is just fascinating. If you ever want to do reading up on the whole steroid trial and testimony from it, it's fascinating stuff. But basically, it all goes back to George Zahorian. You may have heard the name Dr. George Zahorian. He was, I believe he did not work for WWE. I believe he worked for the Pennsylvania State Athletic Commission. He was a commissioned doctor. And for many, many years, in the early 80s and the mid 80s, right on in, really the whole decade of the 80s. I mean, there are photos out there of him at WWF shows as early as the very beginning of the decade. When they would come to Pennsylvania, they would come to, I think Hershey was one of the cities in Pennsylvania that they would run shows in. I don't know about Allentown and some of these other places. Zahorian was usually the doctor that would be assigned. And he was the doctor who would give the boys their candy. So like Bret Hart in his book, and Bret, I love the fact that Bret, he kept journals and notes from like specific days, because who the fuck would remember what he was doing on, what is today? October 25th, 1985. But Bret kept copious notes. And one of the stories that he tells in his book is waiting in line with a lot of the other wrestlers in the backstage, waiting in line to see Dr. Zahorian. And he would talk about how one by one he would see these wrestlers coming out of the office. They would be coming out of their meeting with the good doctor, and they would have like brown paper grocery bags full of drugs. And he said even Vince McMahon, he saw him once coming out with a bag of stuff. And sometimes some of these wrestlers would have so many drugs that they couldn't even carry them in their luggage. They would have to have them shipped back home. He was the supplier. That's basically what he was. So let's go back a little bit. There's a woman, and you'll see her name pop up as well when you look up testimony from the steroid trial and everything. Her name was Anita Scales. And she worked for WWE many, many years ago. She was the person who was responsible for the hiring of the ringside doctors. There was a change that went into effect in the late 80s where the wrestling companies had to basically bring in their own doctors or hire their own doctors. So that responsibility fell on her. And this is all from her testimony under oath during the steroid trial. She claimed that Pat Patterson had called her asking for Dr. Zahorian to be assigned to, again, I want to say it was Hershey, PA, but whatever city it was. He wanted Zahorian to be assigned. They wanted him. The wrestlers wanted him. And she got a phone call from some of the agents, and I think Chief Jay Strongbow called her and was kind of curt, you might say, with her on the phone, a little pushy, a little aggressive. And he was the one who made the comment, the boys want their candies. And so with all the pressure that this woman was getting, she went to Linda McMahon. Linda McMahon was her boss, and so she went to Linda and said, look, I'm getting a lot of pressure from people in the company. They want Dr. Zahorian to be assigned to this city. And we've already gone ahead and we've already done our research into other doctors that we could bring in. And I thought this was supposed to be my choice, but Pat Patterson called me and told me that he wanted Dr. Zahorian. And basically, she had heard things about him that she wasn't happy about. But Pat wanted him. And she claims that Linda said, you do what Pat says. And what ended up happening, and the reason I mentioned how Linda saved the company, as the story goes, this would have been, I don't know what year, probably 89, 90, somewhere around then. I think it was Linda who was at a party and she got a tip that the feds were about to investigate Dr. Zahorian. I don't remember who fed her the tip, or if she overheard it from someone, but she got wind that the feds were going to be investigating the doctor. And Vince McMahon had made the decision he was going to bring Zahorian in full time. He was going to be an employee, basically, of WWE. I don't think it had happened yet, but it was about to happen. And once Linda got this tip, she basically said, let's, in so many words, let's not do this. One thing they introduced into evidence during the trial, and you can find pictures of it online, is a memo. I think it was 89, actually. I think it was December of 89. And she sent a memo to Pat Patterson. And I have the text here of the memo. I don't have the date. I'm almost positive it was the end of 89, but I'll read you right now. I mean, it's not that long. I'll read you the memo that Linda McMahon allegedly sent to Pat Patterson. This is from the evidence that was introduced during the trial. She said, I spoke to Vince about the fact that the state of Pennsylvania is probably going to launch an investigation into the use of all illegal drugs, including steroids. An officer from the State Department mentioned to Jack Krill, one of our attorneys, at a recent fundraiser, that his office would be conducting these investigations. At the same time, he told Krill that perhaps it was a bad idea to mention it to him because Krill's firm represents the WWF. In addition, this fellow mentioned that he was aware of Dr. Zahorian and his relationship with the WWF. Although you and I discussed before about continuing to have him at our events as our doctor on call, I think that now it is not a good idea. Vince agreed and would like for you to call Zahorian and tell him not to come to any more events and to also clue him in on any action that the Justice Department is thinking of taking. On December 26th, the State Athletic Commission is having a small meet and greet session with some of our talent, and I would definitely not want Zahorian there. Please be in touch with me, and I will relay all of the details to you. So that was the memo, and Patterson did call Zahorian, because Zahorian eventually went to jail, and he had to testify as well. And he had a lot of details that he shared in his testimony. And he says that Pat Patterson did phone him, and he warned him that there was an investigation. And this is from Patterson's testimony, because everyone testified. Everybody testified. This would have made great reality TV. But Patterson said, I just warned him that there was an investigation. He goes, I didn't tell him about the steroids or anything else. I just told him there was an investigation. Zahorian says that Patterson said, look, are you calling from the office? And he said that he was. And Patterson said that he wanted him to call him back from a payphone. So he called him from the hospital where he worked, the hospital payphone. And he says that during that phone conversation, Patterson said, look, there's an investigation going on of Titan. And because of this, we feel that, we have to get all the information pertaining to all the wrestlers and whatever it is, the records, telephone numbers, addresses, all of this information has to be destroyed. Immediately has to be destroyed. So basically, they didn't want him to have any records at all of the wrestlers, any of his interactions with the wrestlers, and their personal information on file, anything that could be traced back. They wanted to be destroyed. And in the closing statement that the prosecutor gave, now Vince McMahon, right, he didn't go to jail. That's how the steroid trial ended. He was acquitted on the charges that were brought against him. So that has to be mentioned. But in the closing arguments that the prosecutor made in that steroid trial in 94, he said, look, he looked at the jury and he said, ladies and gentlemen, when was the last time that you called your family doctor and said, hey, where are you? I need you. Are you in the office? Because I need you to go to a payphone and call me back. He goes, when was the last time you did that with a real doctor? He goes, that's how drug dealers talk. That's how drug dealers talk when they want to avoid calling the police. When police are closing in. They have their phone lines bugged or whatever. So that was the argument, part of the closing argument that he made to the jury. And actually, to be honest, if you ask me, what does that make me think of? It makes me think of the mob. How many episodes of The Sopranos did Tony tell Christopher, call me back? Christopher would have to go to a payphone, or Paulie would have to go to a payphone and call him back. That's like mob stuff. It is a little weird. Zahorian ended up being convicted on a whole bunch. I think it was like a dozen counts. I don't remember exactly what the counts were. They were able to link, I think, FedEx packages back to him that he had sent to Hogan and Piper. But he went to jail, and as far as I know, he was in jail for a few years, and I think he went right back to practicing medicine, and I think he's still a doctor, probably somewhere in Pennsylvania. So that was the story. I know I told you I was going to give you the Cliff Notes version, and I just gave you the whole version. So, fascinating stuff. That's one of the reasons why I would love to see Dark Side of the Ring cover the whole steroid trial and controversy from the early 90s. There were so many scandals back then. Such a dirty business. It's a dirty company. What are we watching here? My God. But I think it would be fascinating, and they would have to contain it to 1 hour. But to do an episode on that, it just sells itself. It's just a matter of who can they get to talk about it. They got to get some of the key players involved. You're not going to get Vince or Patterson or Linda or any of those people. But I think that would make for a great episode about the hot tip that Linda McMahon got.